There was a time when the earth breathed in silence, a time when no human voice would ever call it home. The forests were oceans of green, the seas abysses of light. Life flourished in every conceivable form, free, wild, ancient. This was the Cretaceous, an epoch of titans, of creatures so vast they seemed sculpted by the hands of gods. On the plains, herds of triceratops moved beneath a sun that knew no winter. In the skies, immense pterosaurs slid, tooth reigned over a world unseen. Among them, on the land, was the undisputed king, Tyrannosaurus rex. 9 tons of muscle, claw, and fang, driven by an instinct as old as the earth itself. It was a world perfect in its ferocity. On the great northern flats, armored A sun. Further south, the calls of hadrosaurs echoed through river valleys, ancient songs carried on the wind. Every creature had a role, every heartbeat had a purpose. Herbivores grazed upon the immense ferns that covered continents. Carnivores hunted at dawn, when the low light painted the dew and the blood in equal measure. It was balance. It was life. It was pure, untamed power. And yet, even within this raw harmony, destiny was gathering. None of these beings could know that every step, every breath, every glance toward the sky was one of the last in the life of their world. Far above them, in the silent dark of space, something was changing. A fragment of rock, born from the collision of ancient celestial bodies, had begun a journey millions of years before. It moved through the void between Mars and Jupiter, silent, invisible, inevitable. And the Earth, utterly unaware, continued to turn, cradled by its blue sky. Volcanoes erupted along chains of fire, and rivers of lava drew the blueprints for new continents. Every tremor was a breath of the planet. It was a world in constant motion, where life adapted, multiplied, and thrived. A living world, but a vulnerable one. In the vastness of the cosmos, it would take only a single traveler from the void to change everything. That traveler was coming, and nothing could stop it. An entire world, perfect in its ferocity, lived and breathed on the edge of a moment it could never comprehend. Its legacy would not be a choice, but a consequence. A story written in stone by a fire from a sky it had always trusted. In the primeval forests, new species of flora blossomed on a scale never before witnessed. Insects ferried pollen between blossoms, born of a deep and ancient time. And in the skies, the beat of wings that had not yet known fear echoed through the canopy. Among the branches, primitive birds took their first tentative leaps into the air. The microraptor, its feathers dark and iridescent, glided between the trees as sunlight filtered. Mammals dwelled in shadow, watchful, wary, but already poised for a future they did not yet know they would possess. It was a world of ceaseless motion and voice, of birth and of death. A fragile equilibrium suspended over an invisible abyss. Every system functioned, every creature lived. The world was so perfectly orchestrated that perhaps only an apocalyptic end could serve as its crescendo. After a journey of millions of kilometers, the asteroid had entered Earth's neighborhood. Caught in the planet's gravitational well, it accelerated, screaming past the orbit of the moon. Its trajectory now bent inexorably toward the atmosphere. Ahead of its path, the air began to compress and heat, its surface becoming a shroud of incandescence. From the ground, it appeared as a silent, luminous streak, growing ever brighter. Only moments remained before it would tear into the denser layers of the sky. Then, it became fire. A blazing globe, swelling by the second, hurtling forward at more than 70,000 kilometers per hour. A body 10 kilometers wide, yet wielding a force greater than any weapon humanity would ever conceive. Its target? The Yucatan Peninsula, in the land we now call Mexico. There, where the sea curves into a perfect arc, destiny was about to strike. Below, the great reptiles lived out their final dawn. Not one looked up. None could comprehend what was unfolding. The sky began to shift in color. The birds fell silent. The world grew still, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. Then the light, a flash that erased the sun, a roar that held no echo, for it outran sound itself. Time stood still. The asteroid tore through the last kilometers of sky in less than a single breath, its wake igniting the atmosphere, turning day into the light of 1,000 suns. And then, it struck. The sea exploded upward, vaporized in an instant. The impact unleashed the energy of more than 100 million megatons. The play's sky itself was set ablaze. For thousands of kilometers in every direction, nothing survived. A shockwave of unimaginable power raced across the entire planet. Forests vanished, incinerated in a heartbeat. The very air became a wall of flame. From the sea, a wave more than 1 kilometer high was born. Shards of superheated rock and metal were blasted to the edge of the world. The great tsunami crossed the oceans, scouring coastlines thousands of kilometers away. An ancient chapter, closed not with a whisper, but with the roar of a dying star brought down to earth. The ocean swelled, then violently recoiled, scouring the continents clean. The planet itself became a scream. But the end had not yet arrived. From the heavens, fragments of light began to fall. It was the Earth itself. Rock and debris blasted into the high atmosphere, now returning as a world freshly born into darkness. What began as isolated flashes became a relentless, fiery downpour. Day and night dissolved into a single, unending inferno. After the impact, the world was unrecognizable. The sun was gone. The sky, once a familiar blue, was now a gaping wound of smoke and flame. For hours, then for days, the rain of incandescent rock continued. Every fragment that struck the ground ignited new firestorms until the planet was wrapped in a singular conflagration. The great forests vanished in a single searing breath. Oceans boiled, casting clouds of venomous steam into the choked air. Animals searched for refuge, but refuge no longer existed. The air was fire, the ground molten glass. Across the surface, temperatures exceeded 1,000 degrees. The entire world had become a furnace, so hot that even the rocks began to deform. Flames, fed by cyclonic winds, raced beyond the horizon. The largest of the dinosaurs collapsed, their lungs scorched by the impossible heat. Rivers vaporized. The clouds vanished. Only the deep, percussive groan of ceaseless earthquakes accompanied the silence of annihilation. The earth trembled without pause, as if in a desperate struggle to shed the weight of its own destiny. The scar of the impact, the crater itself, lay hidden beneath the sea, but its signature was now etched into the very soul of the planet. Shock waves radiated outwards, circling the globe multiple times, reflecting between mountains and oceans. With every vibration, a piece of the old world was erased. A forest, a lake, a final breath. In a matter of hours, entire ecosystems, millions of years in the making, were gone. The day turned to black, and in the darkness, the ash began to fall. A fine, dense powder that covered everything. It settled upon the dead seas, upon the silent mountains, and upon the unblinking, open eyes of the fallen giants. It was the dust of the end. And yet, as the world burned and then froze, something endured. Deep underground, in burrows, in the mud of dying riverbeds, small lives held on. Insects, amphibians, the first furtive mammals. Forgotten creatures, dwelling in the shadows of a world they did not rule, now hidden in the crevices between rocks. In that profound darkness, the architecture of the future was quietly being assembled. The dust from the impact hung in the atmosphere for months, and then for years, blocking the sun. The world sank into an eternal twilight. Temperatures plummeted as the planet's warmth bled out into the cold of space. The winds carried only ash, sulfur, and the scent of death. Photosynthesis, the great engine of life on Earth, ground to a halt. Deprived of light, the planet's flora began to die, one species after another. The world held its breath, waiting in the cold and the dark for a dawn that was no longer guaranteed. An age had been closed, written in fire and stone, leaving behind a silent, ash-covered page on which a new story, born from ruin, was about to begin. For the plant-eaters, the world had become barren, and as they fell, the great predators that hunted them soon followed. The tyrant Lizard King, once the undisputed master of its domain, now stalked a landscape of ghosts, a skeletal forest offering nothing to devour. The once mighty herds of Triceratops, a moving fortress of horn and shield, were reduced to solitary wanderers, their immense strength sapped by starvation and a relentless, encroaching cold. Hunger consumed them. The chill broke them. The earth itself was becoming a frozen sepulchre. In the oceans, the devastation was just as complete. The foundational algae vanished, and with it, the entire marine food web collapsed from the bottom up. Even the ancient leviathans of the deep were starved into oblivion, suffocated by a liquid silence. And so, one by one, the giants vanished. This was not a singular event, but a slow, merciless unraveling that stretched across generations. Each species left behind an echo, a final footfall in the ash, a last labored breath against the cold, a final gaze upon a world that no longer recognized them. A planet that once teemed with colossal life, now inhaled only soot. But beneath that gray shroud, something else was stirring. There, in the suffocating darkness, beat the timid heart of the future. Years bled into decades. Slowly, the great cloud of debris began to thin. The sun, a pale and distant memory, once again filtered through the toxic haze. The ice began its long retreat. Upon a muted earth, the first true light of a new epoch dawned. A world without dinosaurs. A world waiting to begin again. At first, there was only silence. Then, a whisper. A light breeze stirring across the gray plain. The first rains came, washing the blackened face of the continents. Water seeped into the cracked earth, finding forgotten seeds, and against all probability, they germinated. Life returned, tentative, fragile. Moss clung to the rocks, ferns unfurled between the scorched husks of ancient trees. Small flowers opened their petals to a new and unfamiliar light. The earth breathed once more. The insects were the pioneers, followed by the small reptiles and birds that had weathered the apocalypse. And then came the creatures that had waited in the darkness. Those who had lived in the shadows of giants now inherited the plains. Where titans once shook the ground, lighter, more agile creatures now ran. The world had been changed forever. The long reign of the reptiles had ended. The age of mammals had begun. The planet, scarred and utterly transformed, began to heal. Mountains continued their imperceptible rise. Oceans shifted them. Life returned to its intricate dance. It was not the same life that had been lost. It was new, different, perhaps more fragile, but also more adaptable. Forged in the crucible of global catastrophe, it proved that destruction is never the final word. It is merely the clearing of the stage for the next act to begin. The Earth has not forgotten what happened. It holds the evidence etched into its very stone, in the fossils, in the bones buried beneath millions of years of silence. Every time we stand upon a mountain, every time we hold an ancient rock in our hands, we are walking on the memory of that day. The day the world stood still. The extinction of the dinosaurs was not merely an end. It was the violent spark that ignited the next age. For from that global destruction, the very seeds of our own story were sown. Millions of years later, upon that same scarred earth, the first creatures would appear who could look to the heavens and ask where they came from. Creatures capable of memory, of building, of dreaming. Us. The Chicxulub impact did not extinguish life. It transformed it. And in that single instant, in that 1 second of pure devastation, a new epoch began. One day, perhaps, our own civilization will meet its end. The skies may darken, the seas may rise, the stars may burn out in the cosmic dark. But life will find a way. It always does. Because life does not surrender. It transforms, it adapts, it begins again. And so the time that once stopped for an entire world has continued to flow, all the way to us. It was not the end of life. It was simply the beginning of our own.